Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Kalamata, Greece on April 27, 2026. Very pleased to be joined again by our good friend and comrade. Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on April 27, 2026. We're very pleased to be joined again by our good friend and comrade Laith Marouf from Beirut, Lebanon. Laith is the executive director of the vitally important media outlet in Lebanon and the broader region, Free Palestine TV. Thank you very much for joining us again, Laith.
Good to be with you, Dimitri. Thank you for the invitation.
So before we begin, Laith, I'm going to want to discuss with you today two subjects. One is the alleged assassination attempt of Donald Trump in Washington at the Correspondents Dinner. And the second one, seemingly unrelated, but perhaps much more related than appears on the surface, is Israel's utter disregard for the ceasefire in Lebanon and the overall trajectory of the Iran war. Before we begin, I just want to remind our viewers to like, share, and subscribe if you have not already done so. And also, we've just launched, in response to popular demand and to help fund our on-the-ground journalism, a merchandise website. I hope you'll take a look at it. I'm going to leave a link to that website in the description to this video. So Laith, let's get into it. I'd like to begin with the dramatic events at the White House Correspondents Dinner. 2 nights ago at the annual event in Washington, shots were fired near the main security screening area at the Hilton Hotel where the gala was being held. And police allege that at that time, an individual by the name of Cole Allen attempted to break through the screening area on the floor above the ballroom where the Correspondents' Dinner was then being held. And you can see what we are told is a photograph of the suspect, Cole Allen, lying on the ground after he was subdued. For some reason, he's topless. I guess they searched him and took off his shirt, but there's no indication there, Laith. I think you'll agree that this man has been shot, that he's bleeding. There's no blood. He's not apparently in pain. There's no medical personnel attending to him. So it appears very much that he was not shot or that he's not even significantly injured. And according to police, the only person who was shot was a police officer, but he fortunately was wearing a bulletproof vest and is expected to recover. It's not actually clear on the reports I've seen who shot the police officer. Perhaps he got hit by an errant bullet fired by the cops, because I've seen reports that the only people who actually fired shots were the police and/or Secret Service agents. Now, Allen, we are told, is 31 years old. He's an educator from Torrance, California, with an engineering degree from a prestigious university, and he once worked at NASA, and friends reportedly describe him as a borderline genius. U.S. officials allege that writings attributed to Allen criticized Trump administration policies, referred to himself as the, quote, friendly federal assassin, close quote, and suggested that he intended to target people connected to the administration. As far as I know, Laith, and please correct me if I'm wrong once I invite you to chime in, I have not seen these writings actually published verbatim by the police. So we're having to take their word as to what is in the document or the writings. One other notable aspect about this bizarre story is that when the shots rang out, the Secret Service removed J.D. Vance from the ballroom before removing Donald Trump. And here's a video of what happened. Now, I'm just going to stop there. Again, let's watch J.D. Vance be taken out. Then they go to the president. For some mysterious reason, he falls down. Maybe he just tripped, but let's just watch this again. There's J.D. Vance. So I didn't hear any shots fired when he fell down, Laith. So either he fell down on purpose for dramatic effect or he tripped on something. But in any case, Laith, needless to say, I think this whole thing stinks to high heaven, but I'm really interested to hear what you think about this whole fiasco.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and you put forward some of them. Obviously, the first thing that comes to my mind is that Trump has refused to participate in this correspondents' dinner throughout his first term, and this is the first time he accepts actually doing so. We also heard the spokeswoman of the White House in an interview to Fox News just before the beginning of this event, saying, referring to the speech that Trump is going to be given, and usually it's comedic and attacking or making fun of the media, that there will be shots fired. She said those words, and so I mean, there's so many reasons to believe that this is a theatrical, composed event. When we read the statements of people that went to the event, how security was very lax, that nobody was being searched, that they weren't even being asked for ID, the fact that there was many videos from inside the event where people continued eating and drinking. Some people even packed up all the alcohol that they can find and continued their party out on the street. All of these indicate that this is not a serious event. There was also some of the social media of Mr. Cole Allen that is now all deleted, but some of his social media showed him in a T-shirt wearing the emblem of the Israeli military. So there's too many indications that this is just a theatrical event. I know a lot of people are talking about the midterm elections and how this is supposed to kind of shore up Trump and his coalition in such elections. But in my mind, that's only for those that believe actually that there's democracy, or that those votes actually are not fraud. In my mind, there is no such thing as democracy in the West, and there's no fair elections. It's all fraudulent, the numbers that we see. So is it really about that? I doubt. And in terms of the propaganda that's coming out of the imperial machine, it's very stupid in general, as we see the propaganda coming out about Iran or Palestine or so on. It doesn't convince anybody. So will this convince more Americans to vote for Trump after he destroyed their economy? I don't think so. That's above and beyond the fact that I don't think the elections are legitimate.
Right. I'm really glad you mentioned elections and democracy and the propaganda coming out, because that's where I wanted to talk about next. Immediately after this shooting, this alleged assassination attempt, I noticed a remarkable pattern in the statements that were coming out of Western so-called leaders. I'm going to show you just 6 samples, but there's dozens and dozens of them, probably hundreds at this stage, of politicians from the West of varying importance, all singing from the same song sheet. So here you can see Frederick Mertz, violence has no place in a democracy. Mark Carney, political violence has no place in any democracy. Keir Starmer, political violence in any form has no place in our societies. He didn't mention democracy, but the others did. Here is Kaja Kallas, political violence has no place in a democracy. Emmanuel Macron, violence has no place in democracy. And last but not least, the Prime Minister, the hapless Greek vassal of Washington, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, violence has no place in democracy. What's amazing is that all these people speak a different language, but ultimately they're using essentially the same phrase, the same idiom. Now, Laith, I think there's no one better qualified than an astute observer of Western crimes and violence living in West Asia like you to comment on this notion that political violence has no place in American democracy, as they call it. What do you have to say about that, Laith, this whole notion that political violence is alien to the so-called democracy of the United States?
Well, I want to add that the vassal president of Lebanon also issued a statement, wishing the best to his friend, my personal friend, as he called it, Trump. And obviously, it used the same kind of language. And it didn't matter, obviously, for Joseph Aoun that political violence is being used in the democracy of Lebanon against the most popular political parties and their leaders, and that the United States assassinated, with the help of the Zionist colony, many of the political leaders in Lebanon, in Iran, in Palestine, in Yemen. So the idea that political violence is not part of the American or Western traditions is a fallacy. In fact, this is the core value of Western civilization currently, in terms of its dealings with its opponents politically, assassinations, kidnappings of a president of Venezuela, President Maduro, who is elected democratically, the assassination of the political leaders in Iran, who are all elected democratically, and the closure of Gaza and the besiegement and blockade of Gaza because of the democratic elections in Palestine, where Hamas won those elections in 2006. So there's a never-ending list of murders at the hands of the West, including inside the United States, of like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the leadership of the Black Panthers, even JFK and his brother RFK. So those are all fit in the traditions of politics in the West.
Indeed. With that, let's turn then to the area currently being targeted the most by Western political violence, namely West Asia. And I'd like to talk to you in particular, to begin our discussion of the region, about Lebanon. So about 10 days ago, I think it was April 17th, Trump puts out this tweet announcing a ceasefire in Lebanon, which, by the way, had already been agreed, as the Pakistani leadership noted unambiguously, unequivocally on social media. Lebanon was supposed to be part of the Iran-US ceasefire from the very get-go, but Trump lied, said that it wasn't. And then he comes out on the 17th, a few days after the main ceasefire between Iran and the United States began, and he says, amongst other things, that Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited, in caps, from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. So that's what Donald had to say 10 days ago. Now, after he made this announcement, we'll come back to the ceasefire, the so-called ceasefire, in a minute, Laith. But before we get there, after he made this announcement, you and our comrade Hadi Hotait immediately went down to South Lebanon to see how, amongst other things, I would imagine, the people of Lebanon and those who had been displaced were responding to the announcement of the ceasefire. What did you see?
Well, most people try to go back to their villages to, inspect their homes and their businesses, but the bombardment continued. A lot of people actually went back to those villages that are north of the imaginary yellow line that the Zionists drew. There's a lot of people also inside that yellow line. But as we saw, the Zionists continued to bombard homes and businesses, civilian infrastructure, blowing up any residential areas they were controlling in the border areas. There was, of course, also the assassination of two journalists, Amal al-Khalil and her photojournalist that's with her, in a deliberate assassination where they were left to bleed for hours before allowing the Red Cross and the UNIFIL to come and find out if they were still alive. So the situation continues to be very dangerous in the south of Lebanon, and given that deliberate targeting of Amal and the other journalists, it seems like there's a possibility that more journalists will be also targeted in the south of Lebanon.
Yes, today the BBC, amongst other outlets, reported that Israel killed 14 people in Lebanon alone on Sunday alone yesterday. And they included 2 children and 2 women. And also, this is coming from the Lebanese Ministry of Health. The attacks by the genocidal entity yesterday in Lebanon injured 37. This is what happens when Donald Trump, the all-powerful President of the United States, states that he has prohibited Israel from bombing Lebanon, and enough is enough, and the bombing will be no more. Can you talk to us about other, you mentioned a few, we see some up here, other ceasefire violations that have been carried out by Israel? Any specific ones you think are being underreported in the press? And I'm talking, of course, during the period after Donald Trump's announcement of the prohibition.
Yeah, I think it's over 300 or 400 violations since this statement by Donald Trump. It's also, in general, over 1,500 ceasefire violations since the original announcement of the ceasefire coming into effect. So they are continuing. What we saw, the only change that we saw in the behavior of the Zionists is that they haven't been bombing Beirut or the southern suburb. And so it makes everybody think that when Trump is saying they are prohibited from bombing Lebanon, the Zionists, it seems like they've already included the south of Lebanon as if it's part of the Zionist colony. So there's that impression that the collaborationist regime in Lebanon and the Americans and the Israelis have already decided that the south of Lebanon is not part of Lebanon. And the government here of Nawaf Salam and Joseph Aoun are acting daily as if there's no attacks happening in the south of Lebanon. So it seems like they have abdicated their rule of the south, and that's the only interpretation that we can make up out of this ridiculous situation. You'd think that otherwise, if the south of Lebanon is part of Lebanon, then the prohibition by the emperor would force Israelis to stop bombing the south. So since they are not stopping to bomb the south and they have only ceased to bomb north of the Litani, this is a good indication that all these 3 parties, the collaborationist regime in Lebanon, the vassals in the Zionist colony, and the empire, do not consider the south of Lebanon as part of the territory of Lebanon.
And so from November 2024, when the first fraudulent ceasefire went into effect with Lebanon, until February 28th, when this latest war of aggression on Iran began, Hezbollah showed remarkable restraint and didn't meaningfully retaliate to thousands of ceasefire violations by Israel. But the rules of the game appear to have changed, Laith. I'm going to put up on the screen here the latest statement by the Lebanese resistance about military operations it mounted. These are its military operations just from yesterday alone. And so at 2 a.m., they're always very detailed statements. The resistance takes great care to particularize what they're doing to defend the territory of Lebanon, so that people can see, that they're not just making shit up. So at 2 a.m., they said, in response to targeting villages in southern Lebanon with artillery shelling, the Islamic resistance fighters targeted a newly established artillery bunker belonging to the Israeli enemy army in Al-Bayada town with a swarm of loitering drones. At 9:40, the resistance targeted gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers in Taibeh town with a loitering glider, achieving confirmed hits, and so forth. Now, these 5 military operations are far fewer in number than the average number of daily military operations we were seeing by the resistance before this so-called ceasefire went into effect about 10 days ago. But nonetheless, this is significant retaliation. And a number of the attacks I've been monitoring these statements, we're not simply on genocidal forces in the south of Lebanon, but also on targets in northern occupied Palestine. So I guess first I'd like you to comment, Laith, on what's your best understanding of the territory that is currently occupied by the child killers in the south of Lebanon?
Yeah, the territory that they are occupying is not what they have drawn on their maps. What they've drawn on their maps is their imaginary capabilities. But when we go, actually to the south of Lebanon and look at where they are positioned, they're including things that are within their firing range of their tank shells or what have you, in areas that they consider that they control. But it is mainly the frontline villages in the central region of the border, south of Bint Jbeil, and around the Naqoura area on the coast. And that's like just a collection of 4 or 5 villages there. Those are much of the areas that they are controlling currently are areas that they completely destroyed anyways during the first wave of the war in 23-24. Most of those villages were destroyed. When we're looking at the current villages that they have moved into, they are still being fought by Hezbollah as we are speaking. Like those statements that you read, the Israelis are trying to destroy a few villages that they occupied during this war, round of the war, but they are now easy targets inside Lebanon. There's no air defenses there to protect them. And Hezbollah is using this time not only its ATGMs, its anti-tank guided missiles, but also those FPV little drones that have a explosive shell on them that are very hard to notice as they come to you, and they're very hard to shoot down, or especially that these FPVs are, Hezbollah has now connected them to fiber optic wires and is flying them with these fiber optic wires, meaning there's no way to jam them or intercept them. So Hezbollah has been very successful in the use of FPVs. We saw this morning the Zionists released a video, the Zionist military itself, and there's a lot of questions now on why did the Israeli military release this video of a gathering of his soldiers that are have dead and wounded soldiers being put on stretchers to be transported by helicopter from the field to a hospital in Haifa region. And as these at least 30 soldiers are gathered around this helicopter, a FPV is almost hits the helicopter before it's shot down by a soldier, and then you could see all the Israeli soldiers scrambling for their life. So a lot of people were asking, why did this video get released by the Israeli military, especially that they look really bad in it. They look cowardly. They look like they're not prepared. They look stupid for gathering
such a huge number of soldiers in one location with the helicopter, with the wounded, with the tanks, with with their Humvees, which makes them a easy, sitting ducks for the Hezbollah's fire. So the only explanations that we can make of why would the Zionist military release a video that undermines them is that there is a fight within the military and the political structures of the colony, where the military is telling for now, weeks, that the leadership, the political leadership, that there is no way to win a war against Hezbollah, and that the more you put soldiers on the ground inside occupied parts of Lebanon, the easier they are as targets. And there's no defense to stop these tactics that Hezbollah is using. So that's the only explanation we would have to such damning video of failures in the Israeli military.
I actually watched that video this morning. It was published by Press TV, amongst others. I was inclined to share it with our audience, but I suspect that YouTube would have an allergic reaction. I'm going to provide a link to it so people can watch it. It really is quite a video. I agree with your assessment of it, Laith. What struck me was the amateurish nature of the conduct of the Israeli soldiers. I think there were dozens of soldiers. There was no reason apparent to an objective observer as to why they were all there. They only needed maybe 3 or 4 people to deal with the wounded who were going to be medevaced out of there by the helicopter. And they're all kind of lounging around and not doing anything. And when the drone comes in, there's complete and utter panic, and they don't even seem to have the slightest clue about how to deal with the situation. This reminds me of some commentary I've been hearing from Andrei Martyanov, Russian-American military expert, who says that in his assessment, the Israeli military, at least the ground forces of the Israeli military, are an absolute joke. And the only reason why they managed to inflict so much damage is because they have this Air Force, which has an endless or seemingly endless supply of munitions from the United States that relentlessly bombs civilians and military targets alike. Otherwise, they would be finished as a fighting force. So I do recommend people watch it. It's really, I think, quite telling, and I very interesting, question you've raised. Why did the Israeli military publish it? I think your assessment is the most plausible answer. I want to now talk about something else that the Donald has said about the ceasefire. He came out a couple of nights ago and said that he was extending this fraudulent ceasefire by 3 weeks. And the reason that he gave was that the so-called negotiations between the Lebanese government and the genocidal entity were going swimmingly well. And he said that the meeting was working towards a plan with Lebanon, quote, to help it protect itself from Hezbollah, as if Hezbollah, the resistance, is the enemy of Lebanon. So, Mike, please feel free to comment on any aspect of this, Laith, but what I was specifically interested in was what is your assessment of these negotiations that are taking place? Are they actually leading anywhere? And if they do result in some kind of an agreement, will the agreement itself be implementable?
Well, the last time a Lebanese president signed a normalization peace treaty with the Zionist colony was in 1983. Pierre Gemayel, the president that came on top of an Israeli tank, and within 3 days of him signing that peace treaty surrender, a Lebanese nationalist, Habib Shartouni, emptied a magazine in the head of Pierre Gemayel, and that was the end of that peace treaty and the end of that president. So and in that moment, in 1982, 1983, the Zionist military was inside Beirut. It had disarmed the PLO and forced them into exile to Tunis. There was no fighters
fighting force that could challenge Yemen or its occupation by the Israelis, and it was birthed, that fighting force, from that moment of humiliation, of surrender, of collaboration, of a regime appointed by the West. And that's where Hezbollah was born because of this. Of course, I'm not saying that there will be a bullet in the head of Joseph, or the Prime Minister Salam, but definitely they will have to worry about their life if they go and do such a thing as sign a surrender with the enemy that's killing the people of Lebanon. I think I am not worried about whatever these vassals will do, because the president, the prime minister have zero power in the country of Lebanon. The Lebanese military will not be, confronting Hezbollah or trying to disarm them. There is no Christian fascist, Christian supremacist militias as was in the 1970s and 80s to threaten a civil war against Hezbollah. There is no Wahhabi death squads left to gather from around the world to set off on Lebanon, for instance. I think this is the only reason that Hezbollah is not going into confrontation with the current government of Lebanon, because it doesn't see that there is any way that this government can implement any deal it signs with the Zionists. And this is also the reason that the Lebanese government is not pressuring Israel to stop its bombardment of the south of Lebanon, because it sees the Zionist military as its own police force, as its protector, as it's the one that can punish the population of Lebanon on its behalf for their nationalist and liberationist positions. But in that situation that there is something signed by this regime, we will expect that there will be some revolt somehow. The last demonstrations we saw here last week, had tens of thousands of people surrounding the government buildings, but they were peaceful. If something like this happens, I think within minutes, masses of Lebanese people will overthrow the regime of Lebanon, even without the military intervention of Hezbollah.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about two other things before we conclude our discussion today, Laith. First was something you mentioned at the outset of our talk today, and that is the elections in occupied Palestine. I understand that they were swept by the party of Mahmoud Abbas, Fatah, that Hamas boycotted the elections, that the voter turnout in Gaza was reportedly, and this is coming from the chairman of the Central Elections Commission in occupied Palestine, it was 23%, while in the occupied West Bank it was 56%. They're apparently crowing about the fact, the party of Mahmoud Abbas, that they won in a part of Gaza. I believe it is Deir al-Balach. In any case, these results are dramatically different from the polling, the results that the polling has consistently showed. I've talked about this numerous times in the past 12 months on Reason to Resist, how reputable polling firms in occupied Palestine have shown that Hamas is substantially more popular than Fatah, and that Mahmoud Abbas in particular is supported by almost no one. In a three-way election between him and the Hamas leader and Marwan Barghouti, I think he received the support of 11% of the people who were polled. So in any case, what are your thoughts about this election, Laith? does it mean anything? And how do you account for the results being so different from what the polling has consistently showed?
Remember, these elections were delayed multiple times over the last decade and so, not at the request of Hamas or Islamic Jihad or any other party, but because of the interests, the combative position that Fatah was taking. It was scared of losing the vast majority of seats in the imaginary parliament. There was multiple attempts to hold these elections, the last of them being in 2022 and 2021, when the Zionists refused to allow Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, to vote. And Fatah pretended that this is why they were not going to allow the elections to happen or delay them. Well, now we don't have Jerusalem and we don't have Gaza in those elections, and the vast majority of the parties withdrew, like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And people inside the West Bank are scared to vote. Their names and their information and the way they voted will be handed over by the collaborationist regime of Mahmoud Abbas to the Israelis. And anyone that would have voted against Mahmoud Abbas would have become a target, both of the Palestinian security forces that have killed over 200, 300 Palestinians in the last year alone in the West Bank in the last 2.5 years, and to, of course, the Zionists. But we can take what happened in Jenin as an example of true will of the people in Palestine. And in Jenin, although Hamas and Islamic Jihad didn't run, the resistance in Jenin, the coalition of resistance, put forward a platform, a party to represent the city. And they swept all the seats in Jenin. And the Fatah faction list got so low, insignificant number of votes in Jenin, and people were out celebrating in the city of Jenin and chasing out Palestinian Authority representatives and Palestinian Authority security forces from Jenin. And it's now kind of liberated almost Jenin from the presence of Palestinian Authority. So this is because Jenin is, radical in their position. People are not scared there, and they decided, you know what? If we're not going to be able to vote for resistance groups, resistance parties, well, we'll make a coalition from our own people that are supportive of resistance without being branded as belonging to any other party, and will show this Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas what true democracy looks like. So yes, Mahmoud Abbas only ran these elections because he knew that he can manipulate them, because of the boycott from other parties, because of the inability of people in Gaza and the East Jerusalem to vote, and because how people in the rest of the West Bank are too scared to put their name on a ballot that could be reported to Mahmoud Abbas and or the Zionists for them to be targeted after.
Now, I just want to put up on the screen so people can see clearly what the evidence shows. This is polling results by the PCPSR. It's a reputable public opinion survey firm based in occupied Palestine. And this is the response to a question asked. They asked this question periodically. If new presidential elections are to take place today and Mahmoud Abbas was nominated by Fatah and Ismail Haniyeh, Yahya Sinwar, Khaled Mashal was nominated by Hamas, I believe all of them have been killed, murdered by Israel, I'm not mistaken. But in any case, whom would you vote for? And the latest figures we have from this polling agency was from October 2025. And you can see that 15% in a heads-up contest between Fatah's candidate and the Hamas candidate, 15% said they would vote for Abbas, 34%, more than double, said they would vote for the Hamas candidate. 47% said they wouldn't vote. And I think 5% said that they would vote, they don't know or not available. So there's really, I don't think, any reason to believe there's been some dramatic shift in public opinion between October 2025 and now. You know, in the past 6 months, conditions have not changed materially for the Palestinian people. If anything, the conditions in the West Bank, where Fatah is nominally in control, have gotten significantly worse during the past 6 months because of the unchecked violence of the settlers and the Israeli military. Any thoughts about these polling results, Laith?
I think another very important thing that we can extrapolate from these numbers is not only that, of course, Mahmoud Abbas and Fatah are very unpopular, and that the resistance would win in a fair election, is that the vast majority of Palestinians do not believe these elections to be legitimate under occupation. This is why the vast majority of them, you know, almost 50%, do not want to vote, because they see as voting under occupation as illegitimate, number one. That also, the vast majority of Palestinians believe that even if there was a democratic election, that it would not be implemented, as has happened in 2006 during that first election when Hamas won. So I think this is a better indicator of how this 50% of people not wanting to vote is a clear indication that majority of the Palestinians do not believe the Palestinian Authority is legitimate as a whole. Its existence is irrelevant to them. It doesn't add anything to their representation or services or liberation. Therefore, they don't want to participate in it, and they will not participate in it. And I think this is the correct position that the Palestinians have made. These elections are irrelevant. What's relevant is, can you liberate Palestine or not? And that can only happen by carrying resistance.
And lastly, I'd like to talk to you, Laith, about the overall trajectory of the war, particularly the current state of affairs between the United States and Iran. It seems to me that the Iranian government has unambiguously communicated to the Trump regime that it has no interest in sitting down at the table, certainly for the time being, and definitely not with those shysters, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. With each passing day, the situation is becoming increasingly grave in the global economy. From your perspective, time is on whose side here, Laith? You know, Trump would have us believe, because he's got this blockade going on Iranian ports, that time is on his side. What's your view?
Time is always on the side of resistance, because, you know, on the one hand, we see how the whole region is reorganizing and changing. For instance, you know, hours ago, the Pakistani government announced that it signed an agreement with Iran, where any exporter that wants to send things to Iran can send them through Pakistan without having to pay, you know, fee levies or taxes. So right now, Iran has transportation rights through Pakistan, through the Pakistani ports and Pakistani trains and so what have you. So this means that the blockade is irrelevant already. It shows also that Pakistan is positioning itself to be a trade hub in the region. This means that Pakistan is escaping American control because of the situation that is, you know, and this war and the successes of Iran. I think the whole world is changing, not only the region here, because of this successes of Iran and the axis of resistance. Having said that, we continue to see buildup of American weapons in the region. We continue to read and see belligerent wordings and actions by the Americans and the Israelis. And it's that those are all indications that the United States has not accepted yet defeat. It still somehow thinks that it can fix that defeat and turn it into a win somehow. And in my mind, looking at the military realities over the 42-day war, the United States has used the maximum of its military capabilities below the nuclear threshold. It then threatened to eradicate the civilization of Iran through the use of nuclear weapons and has retreated from that point. So I don't know what else can the United States do to attempt to defeat Iran and or the axis of resistance. In my mind, there's nothing left. There's more death and destruction, but that's it. That's what all the United States can do. And the more the United States, digs itself deeper in this hole, the harder it is going to be to bounce back as a military power. So I expect in the next, day or two or the next week, we will see ourselves back in war, and maybe because of the situation in Lebanon, not really coming into a real ceasefire, that Lebanon may be the trigger that forces Iran, for instance, to retaliate against the Zionist colony, and then we will see somehow the U.S. Making excuse of that to trigger the war with Iran. I see this as the final throes of Zionism and imperialism in the region, and unfortunately, the Americans and the Zionists can, deliver huge damage to civilian infrastructure and can commit genocidal massacres at mass, but nothing else can they do in terms of changing the military balance of the region.
Just for the benefit of our audience, going to put a map up, and you can see there, for those who are not familiar with this region, that Pakistan shares a border with Iran and also with China. So if Iranian goods are traveling freely through Pakistani territory, this gives Iran a direct land route to China and its massive market, thereby circumventing any naval blockade. And of course, there's also the Caspian Sea in the upper left-hand corner of the map. You can see that just north of Tehran, which gives the Islamic Republic a direct maritime route to the Russian Federation. And there are other countries, numerous other countries, bordering Iran with which the country can trade. So obviously, in these circumstances, the efficacy of that blockade is going to be rather limited. The last thing I want to ask you, Laith, on the question of the trajectory of this war, it seems to me that Trump has a political problem. I completely agree with your assessment, by the way, that we are very likely to be in a full-blown war very soon. I think one of the reasons why, and maybe the primary reason why, neither the United States nor Israel has bombed Iran since this so-called ceasefire went into effect, is because they want to provoke a reaction from Iran so that the United States government can go back to the voters and say, we're not the ones who blew up the ceasefire, Iran did. And I think that's part of the reason, maybe the primary reason why there's this blockade on Iranian ports. I think that's part of the motivation for Israel running roughshod over the ceasefire in Lebanon and returning to the mass killing of Lebanese civilians. They're looking for a way to resume the war that will minimize the political damage to Trump, which has already been quite extensive. Is that your sense as well?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to note, obviously, that I don't think the public opinion matters in the West. The population are neutered. They're not going to revolt. I don't think any politician in the West gives a damn about public opinion. So I don't think it's more about not damaging Trump's position to the public or so on. Maybe if we're talking about global public opinion, yes, Iran has been playing a really smart game in speaking to the rest of humanity outside the West, and the West has lost 100 years of propaganda that it's deposited in the minds of human beings. And yes, sometimes we see the Americans trying to speak to the rest of humanity by trying to blame Iran or the axis of resistance, but that's not working. And it's also contradicting always the vulgar propaganda coming out from the imperialists and the Zionists that is directed internally, that we all look at on Twitter and see it. So the ability to convince the rest of humanity somehow that Iran is to blame for whatever breach of ceasefire that's going to come, that's going to trigger the return to full, confrontation, doesn't really play out either in my mind. So I think the only reason that we're not back in full force is that, although the military establishment in the United States has told Trump and his regime multiple times that there is no way to win a war against Iran, and that we cannot use nuclear weapons, that maybe in the mind of Trump and his cabal, that a bigger force being used could have a different result. But in reality, a bigger force being put on the ground in the West Asia to confront Iran will mean a larger number of targets that Iran can eradicate with a few blows to the bases that they're gathered in. So I think there is Trump and Netanyahu do not want to lose this war. They can't find a solution except making it bigger, but they do not have any weapons that can change the balance of this battle, and they cannot use nuclear weapons, because if they use nuclear weapons, the whole world will begin firing them also, and it wouldn't be just the United States and Israel that are firing them.
Well, brother, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Please tell our audience where they can find your work and how they can support Free Palestine TV.
Yes, you can visit our website, freepalestine.video, to donate and to subscribe for monthly donations, to find all our social media accounts. We're releasing tonight a documentary about martyred journalist Amal Al-Khalil, where we recall some of her work and visited during her funeral. Please go ahead and watch that and share it if you like it, and I'm sure people are gonna actually be emotionally moved by this dedicated documentary for the life of Amal.
Thank you very much. And we're signing off today from Beirut and Kalamata, Greece, for Reason to Resist.